طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So today, inshallah, we are going to be talking about utensils. All right, what do you guys understand from utensils and what are they? Anyone?
So basically the things we use to cook food, to drink from, or potentially to also hold the water that we use for wudu.
Perfect, right? So anything that we use usually either to eat or drink or that hold vessels that you would utilize any type of, liquid that we would use, especially for wudu. So this is a very important topic because you have a number of different narrations where the Prophet ﷺ addresses these particular utensils, what happens when certain things fall into them, what type of utensils are permissible to use, for eating and drinking. So we're going to spend some time, inshallah, talking about these. So there are certain things that are forbidden, and those things that are strictly forbidden to use as a utensil are gold and silver. Why is that? I guess you guys can raise hands.
Reasons of extravagance.
Okay, extravagance. طيب Uthman.
I think it's ta'abbudi. There's no illa or a rush or legas behind it.
Yeah, wallahu alam, that's the reasoning that I go with, is that it doesn't seem like there's any clear apparent rational reasoning behind it, and this is something that is called ta'abbudi, meaning that only Allah knows the reason of why he made this thing impermissible, like similar to like pig. Why is pig impermissible to eat? Well, Allah knows best. You have some of the Hanabala, they do give reasons for this, and the reasons that they mention, I think Sheikh Hatem mentions three. Do you guys remember what they are? Does anybody remember what they are? I think israf is one of them, extravagance is one, and then something about kasar qulub al-du'afa wal masakin, that it's heartbreaking for the poor, and I can't remember the third, but I think those are the three that the Hanabala use. Does anybody remember in particular? Where's Ayaz? Do you remember Ayaz or no?
I do not. I remember the heartbreaking the poor, like you had mentioned, but I don't remember the third.
Right.
Let me check my notes.
So which is interesting, because this isn't the only time that this illah or this reasoning comes up. Another space that it comes up in, which we're going to discuss, is in zakat, and how you deal with fiat. So when you have fiat currency or paper currency, do you treat it as gold or do you treat it as silver? And the Hanabila actually treat it as silver, and one of the reasons is for that, because it's actually ahwat lil-fuqara wal-masakin, that it's actually a way to look out for the poor and the destitute. So this is like a consistent theme you'll find out with the Ḥanbalis throughout the different fiqh chapters. So over here, the Hanabila, they do give exception to this, and they do provide some exception to this, and they say like where it's soldering purposes. And the reasons that people use gold and silver for solder is because they're soft metals, right? They're soft metals, and you can actually use them to fill spaces. So if you have a cracked cup, for example, what they would do is that they would actually fill that space with gold or silver in order to fill the crack, so that the water wouldn't leak out of that utensil, or it wouldn't come out of that particular plate. But it can't be used for beautification. Again, why can't it be used for beautification? Because it falls under the same reasoning that they mention at the head of the chapter, which is which is that it's extravagance, and it's showing off, and it's actually heartbreaking to the poor. They also allow intangible amounts for gold and silver plating, meaning that if there is like it's like a micron worth of plating of gold or silver that would not have an effect on the value of that item, then it is permissible to use that amount. Why that would happen, I don't know. But I guess maybe like in certain sections, again, it would probably, for reinforcement purposes, or to give some tangibility to that fork or spoon. You don't want metals that are too hard. And the reason for that is when you don't want it to break. You don't want it too soft, otherwise, it'll bend every time you pick up something. And I think we've all been in those situations. So the The Shafis and the Lahiris, they actually say that this applies to eating utensils only. Meaning what?
Like cups, plates, things like that.
All right. So if I'm not using it for eating and it's like a tool, like a comb or a screwdriver. Now, why you would want a gold and silver screwdriver, Allah knows. But
Yep, like a belt buckle, maybe.
for like a belt buckle. So that goes back to the amount of gold and silver, and that's falls under a different chapter, and that would be clothing. So we'll talk about that. We'll definitely get to that. It's just not in this chapter specifically. So when we talk about utensils, we're basically talking about utensils and tools, right? We're not going to be talking about decoration items or things that are worn, right? Because that could fall under jewelry, and jewelry there are certain exceptions for that as well. So eating utensils, meaning that you can actually have tools that are made of gold and silver, if you are Shafi'i or you are Lahiri. I don't know if there are any tools that actually require gold and silver for whatever specific purposes, because of how soft they are or because of the nature of the actual metal. I know that they use gold in semiconductors, right? But I don't know if silver has any practical purpose other than, again, for soldering into filling cracks. But technically, if you have any tools that require gold and silver, then they would be permissible for the Shafis and the Lahiris. Now, the exception here is what Sayyid actually had started discussing, which is jewelry. So for jewelry, men are actually allowed to wear silver. They are not allowed to wear gold. Women can wear both gold or silver. Okay, so why the exception for men? Why can men not wear gold?
I think there's a narration from the Prophet ﷺ that talked about that in terms of not wearing it, and I think it was a pretty severe, from what I remember, I guess, warning from him about that.
Yeah, so whoever wears it in this world will have no share of it in the next.
Yeah.
All right, so there are two items specifically that we cannot wear. Gold, that for men. Men cannot wear
Gold and silk.
gold and silk. Absolutely. So these are the two things that are forbidden for men. They are completely reasonable and fine for women. Women have no restrictions as such on the type of jewelry that they can wear, whether silver or gold. You do have some modern scholars that use some questionable hadith about wearing round gold. So if it's elliptical in any way, then those scholars see it to be not permissible. But that is a very weak, unique opinion. And there's no scholar that preceded them in saying that. The second group of items that would be impermissible to use as utensils are items that are impure. Like what?
Like najis items?
I'm sorry?
Something made of najis?
Like what? Like we have to
Like
think
dung?
of previous examples.
Like
All right.
dung
All right.
bricks?
So like dung, I don't think anyone's going to be using that as a tool or a utensil. But
I mean, people bake it into clays to like have plates and whatnot.
Okay, so what kind of dung?
Oh, it couldn't be. It's an animal that we can't consume, right? So I guess pig dung or
Ahsant, good.
carnivorous dung, I guess.
Yes, very good. MashaAllah. طيب. Uthman.
Yeah, I wanted to say back home, when we take wudu, there's a container that is made from skin of either goat or so skin of maybe a pig or a dog. Yeah.
Okay, yes, for the Hanbalis, right? They wouldn't be able to use the skin of a pig or a dog. What about the bones of an animal that died naturally? Or from disease or because it was killed? Uthman.
For the Hanbalis, I don't know, but for the Shafis, we consider it najasa.
Okay, even the Hanabila, they would consider it najis. Human remains. Human remains. Can we use them or no for utensils? Get a nice skull for a bowl.
No.
No.
Right? And they're probably there are two good reasons for that. Can you guys think of them?
I mean, one would be desecration of
Uh-huh.
the body, and the body has honor.
Absolutely, absolutely. Uthman, what else?
That was by mistake, Chef. Sorry.
Yeah. Right. That is the main reason. Like you know, can we say that it's human remains or najis?
Taban.
Okay.
No. What do you mean by human remains? Yani
Like
the
the
dead
human
body?
body itself.
No.
No.
No. Okay. So that's why the exception is here, right? Otherwise, why would we have a separate category from impure?
What do you mean separate category?
Yeah, wouldn't human remains be if human remains were impure, why would I make a separate category?
Okay. It's its own category. It's something that's also a forbidden utensil.
Yeah, it's forbidden. Why? Because like I said, it's desecration of the body, and we have been very poignantly impermitted to utilize human remains in any way, shape, or form. We're not allowed to mutilate the human body, right? We're not allowed to mutilate the human body, and this is desecration of that body, regardless of that person being Muslim or non-Muslim. Are there any exceptions, or can you guys think of any exceptions?
Organ donation, maybe, but it's kind of like iffy.
No, organ donation is good. That's a good example. So where does organ donation come into play in Islam? Because this is a bit of a controversial issue. So number one, can we as Muslims donate organs?
Yes, only external.
There's a difference of opinion, right?
External. The only external organ we have, Nazim, is our skin.
Oh no, hold on. I mean, internal organs. Organs are allowed to. I heard from Sheikh Hatem, and I believe it's Amjad's fatwa.
It is. They're all modern fatwas, right? So they're all modern fatwas, and many of them, I don't know if I can say most, but many scholars have allowed organ donation, and many scholars have not, saying that it's a desecration of the human body. But regardless of that difference of opinion, what other situation can we think of where we might need a human body?
For like testing safety precautions in, I don't know.
Like crash test dummies.
or here goes like the body farm, right? Like there are researchers that will watch body composition so that they can help solve crimes, for example. Perhaps that might be, I don't know.
Medical students,
medical
right?
Students. There we go.
Right? Yeah. They need cadavers, right? So where do those cadavers come from?
Typically they're unclaimed, or perhaps they were imprisoned.
Or some people, they volunteer for it, right?
Some people.
Right. Some people, they volunteer. They say, I want to donate my body to science, right? Which is something that is not uncommon. Is it permissible for a Muslim to do that? No.
It's not.
It's not. Yeah, right. I don't know of any scholars who have allowed it. There might be, I don't know. But from what I know, it is not permissible. And people ask, okay, well, what do we do? Well, you get to non-Muslim bodies. If again, it has to be with their permission. You can't do it without their permission, because the body does have sanctity, and we have to make sure that we preserve that sanctity. So,
may I ask about the previous slide?
Sure.
Speaking of golden jewelry for men, is white gold still gold, which is forbidden?
Wallahi, I don't know what white gold is exactly. I thought it was a different metal.
Yeah,
No,
I mean, it's still gold, but it doesn't look yellow. So I'm curious. Just
white gold is an alloy of regular gold and nickel mixed together.
Okay. What do you know the percentages of the alloy?
You can look it up.
Shane, Google.
All right.
Are you sure it's an alloy? I thought it was mostly plated or something like that, but maybe that is an alloy. I don't know. But it is gold. I mean, it is gold for sure. I mean, the quantity between gold and what's plated or an alloy is probably pretty small.
So it's actually an alloy of gold and nickel, 75% gold and 25% nickel and zinc, which gives it its white color. I would not see this to be permissible because the majority of it is still gold.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, what about platinum?
Good to go.
Huh?
Good to go.
You're good to go, right? So, and again, the reasoning being that because we don't have a specific reasoning from the Prophet ﷺ of why he prohibited gold for men, you cannot make analogy on other types of metals. The same thing applies to zakat. So, is there zakat on gold and silver? Yes. Is there zakat on platinum?
There could be, yes.
If there's wealth, if it's part of your wealth.
All right. What about diamonds?
As far as I know, no to any of those.
Really?
There's no zakat on diamonds, topaz, other precious metals, other precious stones. But we'll get to that in zakat, inshallah.
Okay.
Items that we are allowed to use, those that are certainly pure, right? I'm sure for 100% that these are pure items. I can use them. And if I am certain that they are impure, then I cannot use them. So that's two categories. If I'm unsure, this is where it becomes a bit problematic. So if I'm not sure where this item came from, or if the composition is pure or impure, I would assume purity. So you have just to make this very easy and very simple, everyone except the Malikis think it's okay. Everyone except the Malikis think it is permissible. The only difference is that the Hanafis, the Shafis, and some of the Hanabila, they saw it to be makruh, they saw it to be disliked. But again, just because something is disliked does not mean it is not permissible. It is just disliked, right? So that is a very quick summary of the different utensils and how we use them and how we deal with them. I always found this interesting, how the Malikis being so lenient in so many other issues. If you're not sure about utensils, then it is haram. There's another group of utensils here that Sheikh Hatem did not talk about. Do you guys know what they are? Containers that used to hold wine, or containers that are known to hold wine. So using a whiskey bottle or using a wine bottle as a, to keep my water in, or I put my soda in it. Is that okay? How did I get it? Somebody gifted it to me. In case you guys try to play that angle.
Has it been washed? If the material could be purified.
It's been washed 7 times, the first time with dirt. What do you think about that?
I think it's fine.
My fatwa would be Bismillah. Go for it.
Yeah.
But just don't do it out in public because that's not a good look.
Take the labels off. You're fine.
All right. Take the labels off and put it in a paper bag. Got it.
Not a paper bag.
No paper bag. That's worse.
So you actually have a number of different hadith from the Prophet ﷺ where he named specific containers and said that they were impermissible to consume from and they were impermissible to use. All of those containers known to be containers of alcohol. Why do you guys think that is?
There could be trace amounts of yeast inside, and if you put another sugary substance, it could ferment.
All right. Well, so we'll have a discussion on trace amounts of alcohol. I don't see that to be problematic personally.
No, not the trace amounts of alcohol, but if it's something porous and you put fruit juice inside, it'll ferment again, wouldn't it?
I mean, anything will ferment if you any type of liquid that has some type of sugar in it will ferment. Any type of carbohydrate in it will ferment. The most unexpected thing, like rice will ferment. You know what I mean? Soy will ferment. There, so many things will ferment. Ayaz, go ahead.
Is it either not befitting for a Muslim or imitating the kuffar?
Okay, imitating the kuffar, that's a much wider chapter, and that has to do mostly with religious rites and religious functions. And there's no particular religion that can be tied to alcohol containers or alcoholic containers?
I would say for tazkiyah reasons.
Okay, like what? What do you mean by that?
Like when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made something impermissible, even the imitation of it or the appearance of imitation is not okay.
Okay.
Or like for even for one's own heart.
Yeah, like imitating sin, like for like taking a taking like an incense candle and like acting like it's a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly. Uthman.
Sheikh, I think it will be really impossible to wash. Why? Because once you put in that water, there's the concept of lahba latifa fi usul fiqh. At that, then that water becomes impure and it's no more than 2 qullah.
Okay, Jayid. Actually, that is a good reasoning. Vast majority of the madhāhib see alcohol to be najis, and if you put any type of water in it, there is trace najasa that will be in there, and it will be less than 2 qullah. That's decent reasoning. I can see that too. Like, what if, and if we see that there's a genuine difference of opinion concerning this though, and is alcohol najis or not? And wallahu alam, I think all of these are very good supporting reasons, but I believe that that Amna was probably the closest in her answer, in that while it might not be a sin in and of itself, right, drinking from those utensils or utilizing those utensils, how many narrations do we have dealing with alcohol, and how many verses do we have dealing with alcohol versus the number of verses or the number of a hadith dealing with consuming pig? What do you guys think?
Far more.
Which is more?
Alcohol is far more than pork.
Okay. All right. Why do you guys think that is?
It was speaking to the condition of people. Like there's a pull on one's heart if you're talking about like addiction or passion or something that people are really holding on to, perhaps the usage of alcohol. So it's a much harder thing to let go of perhaps than consuming pork.
MashaAllah, you hit the nail on the head. So you're talking about a group of people that actually suffered from alcohol abuse issues, right? Alcohol abuse was rife amongst the era of the companions, to the point where people continued drinking even after the prohibition of alcohol came down, right? So if you have a group of people, to the point where even Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that had Allah forbade alcohol when Islam started, nobody would have become Muslim, right? So this is the extent of alcohol and substance abuse that these individuals actually had in their heart. So by the Prophet ﷺ prohibiting all of the means that would even, bring them into that situation or even draw them near to that, the idea was to keep them away even from the idea of drinking, right? Because what is the best way to stop an addiction? By preventing access to whatever will bring that person back to the addiction. So when I'm drinking from that wine bottle, or if I'm drinking from that liquor bottle, or I'm drinking from that beer bottle, immediately what's going to come to mind, right? Actually drinking the liquid in and of itself, right? And looking and drinking from that bottle is going to remind me of that. And not just that, you guys did mention, like, even there's a social stigma associated with it. If somebody looks and somebody sees me drinking from that bottle, what are they going to assume? And we as Muslims, we should always close the doors of fitna, right? We should always close those doors that would cause people to assume ill about me. So I think that's something that's really important. And, you guys touched on all of these things, because all of the hadith that talk about, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala curses the one who sits at the table where alcohol is being served and where it's being passed around, and where, like you find all of these hadith. There's a hadith specifically in Tirmidhi, the Prophet ﷺ said, لَعْنَ اللَّهِ الطاولة أو المائدة التي تدار عليه الخمر. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala curses the table in which alcohol is being passed around, and then you have other hadith, the one who pours it and the one who brings it, etc., etc. And you find that all of these layers that actually prohibit alcohol in and of itself, it's because the Prophet ﷺ is protecting the companions from falling back into that substance abuse again. So that is another category of utensils altogether. But wallahu alam, it seems that many of those rulings were abrogated later once the issue of alcohol abuse, started declining and started becoming less. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was, Sayyid, go ahead.
It's an interesting question. We're talking about this. Someone asked me this. So this brings up the point. They had non-Muslim friends over, and the non-Muslim friend poured wine into that person's into the mug owned by the Muslim person, and drank it. If what's the case of this mug now? You just wash the mug and you can reuse it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, because even if you see it to be najis, you just remove the najasa, right? And once you remove the najasa, you can use it. That's not an issue. That's not a problem.
Parting gift, right? I guess.
Yeah, Allah Mustan. Allah protect it. I mean, which brings up actually a much larger question about attending functions. You know, sometimes you have social functions at the end of the year. Many people in the corporate ladder, they have holiday functions, which they're not obligated to attend, but there is somewhat of a social obligation to go and attend those functions. And there is alcohol served. Is it permissible to attend those?
Or
but
your family drinks alcohol.
Our family drinks out. You know, you're going to a family event. Inshallah, you know, these are things that we'll definitely. I'll talk about these after we finish this the discussion of this, because I think it's very relevant. So you have a difference of opinion also on how to deal with the dead animals. So there are certain things that you have that are connected directly to the animal but aren't considered part of the animal itself. And how do you actually define those? You know, for example, if you talk about the hair, you talk about the wool, you talk about the hooves, you talk about the horns, right? Are all of those considered essentially part of the animal, or are all of those connected to the animal? Right, and that's, you have again a difference of opinion amongst the different fuqaha and how to deal with those things. So if it's connected to the animal, and that animal is considered pure, right? And when it was taken from the animal while it was living, right? So I can cut the feathers, I can cut the hair, I can cut the wool of an animal, and that animal is considered pure, right? And that animal is pure when it's alive, then it is permissible for me to take it after it's dead. The Malikiya, they dealt with the animals a little bit differently. They said that after it's dead, it's not considered essentially connected to the animal, right? So these things are actually considered separate from the animal, meaning that if I have an animal that I slaughtered, if I had an animal that I slaughtered, I can take the wool, hair, and feathers from that animal. If I have an animal that died naturally, if I was Ḥanbali, I would not be able to take it. But if I was Maliki, it is permissible for me to take benefit from that. The skin is an exceptional case, and we'll talk about the skin, inshallah. So pig's hair. You have the Hanafis, the Shafis, and the Hanbalis. They say it is impure, but it is allowed to be used when it's dry. So you guys know about the boar hair combs? So they say that you can use it, but the Hanbalis say that you can only use it while it is dry. Why? Why do you guys think that is, based on the previous chapters that we studied?
Because the sweat is najasa.
Ahsant, right? Because of the sweat, right? Because the sweat is najis, and the amount of water that those they're touching is less than a qulla, then, or less than a qullatain, then it would mix with the najasa and therefore become impure. That is why it is okay to use while it is dry. I don't believe the Hanafis and the Shafis put that same condition. And like we said, the Malikis, everything's pure anyway, so that's not an issue. So these are the things that are connected to the outside of the animal, right? So this would include nails. This would include horns, right? It would include all these things. What about those things that are inside the animal? And this brings up actually a very interesting discussion. What is something inside an animal that would be used?
Teeth, bones.
I'm sorry?
Teeth and bones.
All right, teeth and bones. Good. That's one. And sometimes those can be considered an essential part of the animal itself because of how they're connected. But another thing that is enzymes.
In the Hanafi madhab, enzymes are halal to use, but 3 other madhab are forbidden. Do forbid using enzymes.
They are, and the reason is we will talk about it, inshallah. We'll get to it when we get to bones. So the skin, any skin after tanning, this is the Hanafis, the Shafis, and the Lahidis. They say that regardless of the skin, it is pure. So the pigs and dogs and the Shafi'iyah, they say that these cannot get pure. Those cannot be purified. The Hanafis, they say the dogs can be purified, but the pigs cannot be. The Lahidis, they say all can be purified. Does that make sense? I'll assume yes. So finally, bones. So the Malikiya, the Shafi'iyah, and the Hanbalis, they say bones of dead animals. Now, these are dead animals, right? They died by other than zakat. They died by other than slaughter. They are considered pure. The Hanafis and Ibn Taymiyyah, they say that they are impure. Also, the Hanafis, they allowed enzymes, right? The other madhāhib, they did not. This is based on the narration of the Prophet ﷺ accepting, or the companions eating the cheese of the Majus, right? They used to eat the cheese of the Majus, knowing that they would take the enzymes from the cows. So again, this has all of these discussions, this entire discussion, and I will share the slides with you guys if you guys don't already have them afterward, inshallah. All of this discussion revolves around how do you define what is connected and what is disconnected from the animal. That's it. That is why you have such a difference of opinion concerning these different things. So like, hair, wools, tusks, hooves, the teeth, bones, and the acid and the enzymes inside the animal, are those essentially the animal, or are those part of the identity of the animal, or are they considered separate from the animal? And that's why you have a difference of opinion concerning that. That's all that I had concerning utensils and how to actually break down and define the animal. Another interesting discussion is also using a dead animal. Like, how can you benefit from the dead animal? So many scholars, they allow, because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he allowed using the skin after it is tanned. And some scholars actually allowed using the fat of the animal, again, not for consumption, but they actually used to take the fats of the animal and they would coat their ships so that barnacles wouldn't stick to them. There's an anti-barnacle coating that they use now, but back in the day they used to put fat on the ships so that the barnacles wouldn't stick to the ship and ruin the hull. So that's that's a little bit of connected side discussion concerning that. But the meat they wouldn't utilize because it's haram, but the skin and the fat would be utilized, and that would be in a usage sense. Any questions concerning what we discussed or what we talked about today? Sorry, I'm a little stuffy. It's the COVID.
Allah preserve you.
I mean,
Give you fair.
This one is it's related to something that you said, not specifically about the content, but I'm just looking for perhaps kind of like foundational source support for your statement, as Muslims we should close the doors to fitna. I feel like this is extremely applicable in community settings, and I just want to be able to drop this on people. And so how should I source that?
So the thing is that is more of a discussion of something called sadd al-dhari'a. Sadd al-dhari'a is closing the doors that lead to haram. The issue with that is that sometimes that judgment can become very arbitrary. Meaning that, okay, well, I see that it's going to lead to this, and you just start closing all of these doors and you become extremely restrictive. So we have to be very careful with that. So the way that I like to determine sadd al-dhari'a, because the thing is, again, when you start doing your personal application of these things, it becomes really, really dangerous. It leads to women not being able to drive cars, right? like you have in some countries. I no, khalas, I think it's done now. It was only in one country that had come up with it. But you have to be very careful in its application. And the best way to apply that is by actually looking at researches and looking at statistics on what happens in particular situations. So when, for example, does introducing children to movies before the age of 5 make them more sexually active as they get older? Then I can actually, and I'm just coming up with stuff, from the top of my head, but I'm saying, if you can actually prove that through studies, then that is a reasonable thing to introduce to parents and say, hey, listen, we're not going to let our kids start watching movies until they're 7, for example, right?
I hear you. I mean, I feel like that's good context.
Yeah.
I feel like it's also one of those things TBH, I feel like my thought there was, no, I'll talk about it later. We're recording. I'm good.
No problem. And the thing is, the people will be like, okay, well, if you allow children to go to mixed schools, they become more perverse, or they become more sexually active at an earlier age, whatever. I'm completely okay with having those discussions as long as we're honest with the studies that we're using and that we're utilizing those studies correctly. Allowing mixed environments, for example, does it allow children to get married earlier, right? Because the thing is, some people might say, okay, well, they become more active. I'll be like, okay, well, are they getting married also? So there are risk and rewards and everything. I do have a lecture that I'm preparing on both subjects, one on sadd al-dhari'a, on how to actually determine when do you close the door, right? When you're looking for proactive efforts to stop a particular haram. How do you determine that? And the other discussion I think is that's very important and relevant is risk and reward. How does the individual determine his risk and rewards? And Islamically, is there something there that actually tells us, hey, you can do this or you can't do this? And something very relevant even now to COVID, on an individual level, what kind of risk am I allowed to take, and what kind of precautions am I supposed to take? And not just that, if I'm taking certain risks and precautions, am I allowed to enforce that on others? Very important conversations, and I think I haven't seen anybody really deal with it in a good scientific type of way. I hope, like I said, I have something that I'm preparing, inshallah, that I hope to present.
I hope you can do it, because I feel like I'll just say this one last thing and then I'll stop about this until later. But that piece around like when people are in community and like how do you make decisions about what parts of you share versus what parts of you don't you share, it's all like that. That's where I was coming. I can see now how it could be misused in terrible ways if you're talking about like private minimum, public maximum kind of like stuff. But specifically around like how do you as an individual make good choices to avoid fitna? Like when you roll up to the Salafi mosque, you should probably put on some socks. It's a good idea. Like whatever you're,
whatever the case might be, just being. I think social intelligence is an important part of that too, and understanding where you are, who you're dealing with, how to speak. There are a number of factors that really do come into play. And just so I don't forget, and while it is related, is it permissible for me to attend family gatherings or even friendly gatherings or corporate gatherings where alcohol is being served? What do you guys think?
I heard one from one sheikh explaining that if you really have to go, like it's not your legal obligation, but meaning you have to go just to be in that gathering. So you have to go there and try staying as little as possible and stay as far from alcohol as possible and come back.
Okay, good. I think that's a very reasonable way of dealing with it. Anyone else?
Piggybacking on that. Oh,
no, go ahead.
Piggybacking on that, I would say like, assuming that you don't have any like tendency or some kind of inclination towards drinking, and then not being there like just kicking as if this is your home, but like going there to do your necessary things, to do the networking, etc., and then dipping. But like if you don't have any, not addicted to alcohol or you're not inclined in any way, I would imagine that would be permissible.
Okay. Yaz, you were going to say something?
Not necessarily on the ruling, but what I have found generally in my career is that the end, like you get more respect in some situations, and this is just my personal experience. Obviously, everyone may have different experiences, but I feel like I've always been respected more when I've set up like what I'm okay with and what I'm not okay with. Absolutely. And they are very respectful of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think you're right. It's very important to set up social boundaries. There's no doubt about that. And if it is a purely social gathering without any type of I guess work implications, because the thing is, if you consistently don't show up to many of these corporate meetings, you become socially shunned, right? And that becomes a problem. And also when it comes to family gatherings, is it more important to stay away from alcohol or to maintain that family relationship? Again, and this is, sometimes these are very personal questions. Some people, they do have issues with alcohol and they have problems with alcohol. And that was, again, we have to understand what the purpose was behind the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam making the statements that he did concerning alcohol, right? He's dealing with a group of people who did suffer from substance abuse, right? And it was a real problem and a real issue from them. And he closed every single doorway possible that would lead them even to thinking about alcohol. So if we are putting ourselves in situations where we are socially pressured to drink, we are obligated to leave that situation. Does that make sense? If I'm in a situation where I'm socially pressured to drink, even in small amounts, right? It can be something as simple as, oh, come on, that's it, I need to get out of there. So if that ever comes up where I'm socially pressured, whether it be in a small way or in a great way, I need to remove myself from that situation. But if I can still go to these gatherings, make sure that my presence is known, And then if I leave, all I have to do is leave after 1 or 2 drinks, because most people won't even remember that I'm there. They'll just remember I came, right? And and then they're too drunk to even remember anything that happened after that. You've done your social obligation. You've managed to fulfill whatever context that you did. You've changed their perception of who you are and how you are, and you removed yourself from the situation. I think there's a win-win that can definitely happen in all of this.
I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
What is I wouldn't say permissible, but what is preferred in terms of children, when especially in family situations, when you know that they would be exposed to it? Like, if a person, an adult, is has an existing obligation, but a child does not.
Yeah. So the thing, children don't really know, right? And even in cultures where drinking is allowed, they won't give a drink to a child. I don't know any cultures that openly will be like, hey, come here, 5-year-old, let me give you a shot of liquor. I don't think that that's even culturally acceptable, let alone religiously. So in those situations, again, you always have to weigh, is this family relationship worth it, right? Am I maintaining my family ties by doing this, or is it my own stubbornness that is preventing me from doing that? Because many times we'll use religion as a shield to prevent us from carrying out certain obligations, or to keep us out of, I don't mean uncomfortable in a Shari'i sense, but in a personal comfort type level, where I'm trying to remove myself from that personal comfort level, when the reality is, like, as Muslims, there's no harm in making ourselves vulnerable. If anything, we should try to make ourselves vulnerable so that we become more humble and we really lower ourselves in front of other people. But go ahead.
I meant more in the sense of like the unacceptable behavior, like that follows drinking.
Yeah. No. Listen, you should be out of there before that even happens. So I advise everyone, like, after you see like, if you see someone having a couple drinks, that's usually, personally, that's my gauge. And that's at that point. And like I said, some people will be very surprised, but the number of clergy gatherings that have alcohol, it's ridiculous. Like, it really is. The clergy drink like it's water. So I've been to a number of those gatherings, and I understand the pressure and I understand the difficulty. If you're talking about a situation where you have one uncle or one cousin who just makes himself obscene, I think it's very important to kind of have a family meeting regarding that individual, because that person might need an intervention, and because they might end up harming other people, because that alcohol does remove that inhibition, and they will say or do things that are inappropriate, not just toward you, but sometimes toward a number of people in the family or a number of people who are attending.
I have a follow-up question with that, but I don't want to take too much time. So can I just message you later, inshallah?
Yeah, sure. That's not a problem.
Okay, inshallah.
Awesome. Any other questions? We got 2 minutes. I guess we're good. Inshallah, I will update the slides, and I'll email them to you guys, or I'll share them in the group, inshallah. And in the meantime, I will see you guys next week, and I will assign the homework today or tomorrow. بإذن الله. والله أعلم وصلى الله على خير خلق نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.